So at the very end of the second chapter of Sha'ar, there's a Haggah here from Rabbi Yitzhak Volozhin, the son of the author, and that's where we're going to begin tonight. So we're talking in general about the concept of a bracha, of man blessing God, and particularly though we're focusing on the topic now of shemos, of names of God, different names of God. That's what we're going to be focusing on in the coming chapter, chapter 3. And so here there's a fascinating statement from the Pirkei Rebbe Elazar. So here it comes. Umasha Amar bePirkei Rebbe Elazar. Shekoidim shebara kadosh baruch hu es ha'olam. Hayahu ushmo levad. So before God created the world, it was him and his name alone. So certainly the world didn't exist before he created the world. And if you would have just said God was all alone, that would be relatively easy to understand. Before God created anything, it was just all God. He was alone. But this says, provocatively, that it was Hu Ushmo Levad. And the question is, what's the meaning of Shem Hashem, of God having a name? A name is a way for someone to call you. Like, do you have a name if you're the only thing that exists? The name implies connection, the ability to refer to someone because there is someone or something else. But when there's only the existence of the one unique and perfect God, why would he even have a name? So that Koidim Shebara Kadosh Baruch Hu es ha'olamo hayahu ushmo levad, there's an implied conundrum. There's a question in that. And here comes the Rabbi Yitzhak Volozhin to answer that question. He's medayik the word Koidem Shebara Daika, meaning right as he's ready to create the world. And so he's, let's say, planned to create the world, decided to create the world, had a will to create the world. Ratzaloimar Oilam Habriya. So we're holding by Oilam Habriya, meaning the above that is Oilam Hatzilus. Okay? So now what the Pirkei Rebbe Elazar is saying is that as a Kodesh Baruch Hu, as sort of willing and deciding and thinking and planning of creating a world, so before he's actually created the world, but there's now Hu V'Shmo Levad. Ratzalomer Oilam Abriya. Hayahu B'Atzmuso Yizbarach Ushmo Hainu Oilam Ha'atzilus Levad. So he interprets Shmo as Oilam Ha'atzilus, which is a world of divinity. We talked a number of times about 4 Oilamos. There's really innumerable worlds, but there's sort of like 4 categories of worlds. And the world we live in is known as Oilam Asiya. It's a world of action, of deeds, of stuff. And it's a Oilam Rubo Ra. There's a real lot of evil. It's a very low world where we read the headlines and we understand that very well. There's a world above it of Oilam Yitzira, a world of Yesh Mi Yesh, a world of angels, a spiritual world. There's a higher world yet called Oilam Abriya, and that's associated with Kisei HaKavod. And there's a world above that that's Kulo Kodesh, Kulo Elokut, entirely a world of divinity. It's essentially unknowable to us. That's called Olam Atzilus. And the word Atzil, we know the word Atzil from a number of usages. First, the word Etzel, Ani Yoshev Etzlo, Ani Oved Etzlo. So the word Etzel is like next to, or appended to, or connected to. And so the world of Atzilus, these are called Atzile Yadayim. Your elbows are called Atzilim. And Atzil is also someone aristocratic. That's another usage of the word Atzil. So all these things are relevant to the Oilam Atzilus, which is a world of divinity that is, in a sense, a connective world. It's a connective realm between anything even higher than that. We've talked about things even higher than that, something called Adam Kadmon, and we talked about Or Ein Sof, it's Atzmuso Yizbarach. So between those high things that are totally beyond our comprehension or any of our fathoming, and between the Oilamos, the world of angels, the world of Kisei HaKavod, the world that we live in, so there's a world of connection. So even though the Oilam Atzilus is a world of divinity, but it's a world of the divinity connected to the creation. And that's what he's honing in on here in this memra of the Pirkei Rebbe Elazar. Shekoidim shebara HaKadosh Baruch Hu es oilamo hayahu ushmo levad. So in other words, we're holding right above Oilam Habriya in the Oilam Atzilus. And so, Hu Atzmuso Yizbarak, Vishmo Hainu Oilam Atzilus, they were Levad. Aval Ilule Ha'etzil Yidbarak Shmo, Me'ito Olam Ha'atzilut, had he not yet begun to emanate or extend into the Oilam Atzilus, Lo Haya Shayach Al Atzmuso Yizbarach, Hoya Hoy V'Veyiyah. There would not even be the shame, not even Shema Etzem, the shame Havaya. All that really becomes relevant from the time of Oilam Atzilus, which is already extending into Oilam Habriya, Bereshis Bara, the beginning of creation. So that's this explanation of this sentence in Pirkei Rebbe Elazar, that before Hashem created the world, Hu Vishmo Levad. Again, it means that a name for God only could exist and needs to exist from the time that he's planning and he's on the cusp of creating a universe. Before that, and even higher realms where it's just Hu Levado, he's by himself, not even Shem, not even a Shem Hashem that's relevant in those higher realms.
Sorry, Rav Yeshua, how
Yes.
come the shame belongs to like a higher level to Atzilus, whereas Akadosh Baruch Hu himself we associating or to Bria?
I don't agree with what you just said. When we talk about, this terminology we use, Atzmuso Yizbarach, which the Nefesh HaHaim uses here, Hayahu ve'atzmuso Yizbarach. So Atzmuso Yizbarach is above Oilam Atzilus. It's above that. It's the unknowable essence of God. In the previous chapter, the Nefesh HaHaim called it Satim de Kol Stimin. It's something totally concealed. And there's no words for it, no way for us to describe it. Leis machshava tfisa beklal is an expression the Zohar uses. No thought can begin to fathom it. So that's, when we say Atzmuso Yizbarach, we're talking about God's unknowable self. And that's way above everything. So here we're talking about anything above the Oilam Atzilus doesn't have essentially a shame. The shame Hashem, any shemos, and this chapter we're going to start now has a lot of shemos, of Shakai and Elokim and Flakos, all these shemos. There's a Balaturim that has a list of Shivim shemos, of 70 different names of God. So there's lots of names of God. We're going to talk about Ekya, Sher Ekya, but all these names are about his relationship to his creations, namely us, his relationship to the world that he created. But when it was God by himself, before he had created a world or a universe or anything, so it's not shaykh to have shemos, because shemos are about interaction between two beings. And when there's only one being, so then there's no shemos. So that's what he's trying to analyze in these words of the Pirkei Rebbe Elazar. What does it mean before the world was created that there was already a name of God? And he's answering because it was on the beginning of Bria in the Oilam Atzilus. Okay?
So, but there were spiritual beings in these other worlds, even if they weren't physical, correct? Or no, not yet?
I would say the first creation that we talk about in Oilam Abriya is the Kisei HaKavod, which is, an entity, hard to describe exactly what it is. But the angels, for example, are from the Oilam HaYetzira. So we're talking, before the creation of angels. Let's say angels need a name for God. V'kara zeh el zeh ve'amar. They have to call out one to another, and v'yikra el Hashem, and ayeh mekoim kvoido. They're asking, where is makom hakavod? So angels definitely need a way to communicate with the boss, with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. So, but at a time before the creation of angels, so then who's asking what his name is, right in an earlier stage even than that.
Okay. This is gnarly stuff.
Yeah, gnarly. David, we can't hear you.
You drive yourself crazy trying to picture anything remotely fitting these things.
Yeah, I agree. It's very, very abstract, very high heavens. David, do you want to give it one more try to see if we can hear you? All right, we can come back otherwise. Okay, so I do have one. Let's see. Yeah, I want to share a note here. I have this. It's called Nefesh HaTzimtzum. It's by Reb Avinoam Frankel, who's a really good man, an Englishman who lives in in Beit Shemesh, and he's written like a critical edition with notes and explanations of the Nefesh HaHaim. And I'm on page 316 of the first volume, and 317, and he has a really good note here. He says God's name, which describes his essence, is Yud Kei Vav Kei, which is a condensed form of Hoyo Hoive V'yiyeh, referring to his transcendence over time, i.e. over past, present, and future. But without the emanation of the world of Atzilus, there is no meaning in the application of any form of descriptive name to God, and to even talk of him transcending time. Reb Chaim, the author, subsequently explains later in I guess in this gate, in his lengthy quotation from the Zohar, that the ability to form an image of this name and of God's characteristics is only from the world level of Bria, creation, and downwards. In other words, while the ability to relate to time is only meaningful from the perspective of a created being, right? There's no passage of time for God. I think that's obvious to all of us, right? There's only passage of time for a created being. But the potential to relate to time and God's transcendence of it only came into being when God emanated the world of Atzilus, emanation. Before the world of Atzilus, so then there's not even a transcendence of time. There's simply no time. He quotes now from the Shla, and then you will understand the innovation, the creation of the world was not anything new from God's perspective, such that it would reflect a new will. It is only something new from the perspective of the creations that had occurred to God's will to create them. Rabbi Lazar and Pirkei Elazar hinted to this, that before God created the universe, he and his name existed alone. That's what we just quoted. Hu ushmo levado. I will preface an explanation of this from the book Ginas Egos, which elaborates on this issue, and I will summarize his thoughts. Know that the name Yud Kei Vav Kei is called Shema Etzem, for this name relates to the essence of the truth of his existence before and after he created the universe, where after he created Hoya Hoive V'yiyeh, Melech Malach U'Moilech, Ani Hashem Lo Shaniti. That's a pasuk in Malachi. In any way, as a result of the creation, including the creation of time, Hashem is totally unchanged by that. His other names were only newly applied to him after he created the universe, and these are generically referenced as Elokim, for it is a line of judgment. Similarly, judges are called Elokim, for this name relates to the central concept of what it is, how God is manifest in terms of a judgment which controls and constrains his essence and results in the existence of creations. Therefore, Elokim has gematria hateva. We've mentioned that on many occasions. The correspondence between the Shem Elokim has gematria of 86, which is same as nature, as the Zohar says. For nature is an organized concept, entirely through the line of judgment, controlled to cause creations to exist, the laws of science and nature, in a fitting and proper manner. So that's, I thought, shed some light on it, about the Shem Ha'etzem, Yud Kei Vav Kei, versus the Shem Elokim, which is a reference essentially to all other Shemos, which are particular and controlled and limited in some sense. So we're ready now to begin the next chapter, Sha'ar Beis Perek Gimel. V'hu ma'amarim zal b'shmois Rabbah Perek Gimel. It's about Moshe Rabbeinu, what's called a theophany. He meets God at the burning bush, and he asks God, "What is your name, and what should I tell the Jewish people your name is?" Elokei avoseichem shalachani eleichem. Oisa shah nisbar Moshe ala sakav. Oisa shah haya mevakesh Moshe sheyodi'enu kadosh baruch hu et Hashem Hagadol. So Moshe is asking Hashem to reveal his name. Amar le HaKadosh Baruch Hu leMoshe, Shmi ata mevakesh lida, you're asking to know my name. The answer to that is, Lefi ma'asai ani nikra. God answers, even my name is really unknowable to you, but my name is according to my deeds. Because remember, God is totally concealed and unto himself in his essence. It's only, he's sasim mitzad atzmo vegalia mitzad maisav, right? His deeds, the creation of the world, is a revelation of God and his omnipresence and his omnipotence. So lefi maisa ani nikra, it is according to my deeds that I am called. Pa'amim ani nikra bekel shakai, I'm sometimes called kel shakai. Bitzvakois obelokim behavaya, and God explains it again. This is all the midrash. Kishani danis abriois, when I stand or sit in judgment of my creations, ani nikra elokim, like we say in Parshas Mishpatim, v'nikra balabayis ela Elohim. Elohim is a word that refers to justices, to judges. So Hashem uses that name when he sits in judgment. Kishani yosem milchama b'risha'im ani nikra tzvakot. When I'm making battle against the wicked, I'm called the God of legions. Kishani toile chata'av shel adam. When I suspend judgment for a person and put up with their sins, ani nikra kel shakai, I'm bending the rules, if you will. Kishani merachem al oilami, ani nikra havaya. So in this formulation, it seems like havaya is just one of the midos. It's, you have to be careful with this, and I'm trying to understand it. Have ekye asher ekye ani nikra lefi ma'asai. So the Midrash concludes with the statement that when God said to Moshe, ekye asher ekye, he's saying, I will be that what I will be, and he's saying, my name is that I will be what I will be. Lefi ma'isa ani nikra, I have different shemos, and they are to be used in reference to my hischabrus, to my connection to the world, depending on what I'm doing at any given time or epoch. So my name, does change. God is unchanging and he's perfect, but the names are different. And it has to do, again, from our perspective, a human perspective, a perspective that lives in a finite time and place. So at a given time or place, Hashem is doing one of these things, but maybe not all these things. And so we're going to refer to him according to ma'asav, to what he's doing. So a very, very important idea. Why is it that one God has so many different names? And the answer is that the one God himself, really no name can reach him. And we talked about that last week, about, how we don't, even we Jews and people that stood at Mount Sinai and were Makabel the Torah, we don't think that we have God in our pocket and we know everything about him and so forth. No, there's these infinite levels of God's infinite everything that we can't talk about or grasp. And what we're talking about is what he willed and decided to reveal to us and interact with us. And in as much as he interacts with us in many different ways, so we have many different shemos for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But his unknowable essence remains unknowable and perfect and essentially nameless. So he goes on, Kilo ra'item kol tmuna da'aksiv tmunas Hashem yabit afilu ha'tmuna leisle ba'atre ala k'denachis la'amlacha layu v'yispashet al biryan. So again, he's demonstrating the idea, the distinction between God up there and out there versus God when he's coming down to rule over his people. The hakarim debara diukna be'alma b'tzir tzura havahu yechidoi below tzura v'dimyon. So God was totally unknowable. Umandish the moidale kadam bria the iul of our midyukna asr lemevele tzura v'diukna be'alma afilu b'shma kadisha below b'shum ois v'nekuda be'alma. So we write the Shem Hashem, and we in a Sefer Torah or mezuzos and tefillin, we write Yud Kei Vav Kei, and the Sefer, right, he goes to the mikvah and he writes those with kavana, that he's writing them with kedushas Hashem. And if you erase them, we will give you malchus, right? You'll get flogged. you've done something awful. As it were, you've destroyed something godly. So there's kedusha, there's divine emanation in those letters of words in the Torah or on the tefillin or the mezuzah or really anywhere that a person would write the Shem Hashem, the kavanas kedushas Hashem. There's something godly there. But before Hashem created the world, like those letters could not capture anything about him. So the fact that there's kedusha in nekudois, in oisios, that's a result of his will to create a world and to interact with his creations. So that is the status quo, but it's a really big chiddush. That's what he's talking about here. The ha'iu ki lo re'isem kol tmuna. Aval baser de avid ha'diukna de merkava to adam ilah nachis taman viskari bahu diukna havaya. Okay, so once Hashem did create this whole thing, and David, last week you asked about the Merkava, here they use that term, that Hashem has created this whole mechanism and this whole construct and complexity. God is simple, okay? But this is complex, right? The way the world works with angels and shemos and all this stuff going on, this is a complex paradigm. And now it has a name. And it has, we could picture Yud Ke Vav Ke, and that's meaningful. Begin dit ma'oshtanle b'dmustile, kel elokim shaka itzvakois ekye. Begin di yishtamoid anle b'chol mida umida, ech yisnoig alma b'chesed uvedina. So there's all these different shemois because Hashem wants to make known different ways that He interacts with us in different midos. He's running the world b'chesed or b'din or b'rachamim, v'ayle leman de yishvele b'shum mida v'chulei. Unfortunate is the one who doesn't get the complexity of it, or only understands a certain mida. El dimyoyna dilei kefum shel tonusei ala humida v'afilu al kol biryan kedistalik mina leisle mida below dimyon. Let me see how he says that over. Woe is to he that compares Hashem's essence with a specific character trait. The comparison should only be with his control over the specific character trait and even over his creation. So again, don't make the mistake of thinking that you're referring to Atzmuso Yisbarach when you're using a particular shame. The shemos are important, and there are shemos she'enam nimchakim that you're not allowed to erase. They have kedusha. Hashem has extended and emanated and illuminated with divine light onto these shemos, and so they do have true divine kedusha. But still, don't think that this is Atzmuso Yisbarach. That would be vile. That would be woe to the one who thinks that. Okay. Ube Parshas Pinchas, ihu lo iskare havaya v'kol shman elabis v'ispashtus nahoiri alayu v'kadistalik minayu leisle migarmei shem klal. Again, this is a very, very explicit memra, quoting from Mazor and Pinchas, that all these names, b'kol shman, is only b'hispashtut. It's only when Hashem is extending his light. Ispashtus nohoiri alayu. He's shining his light onto them. But if he is mistalik, he takes away the light from them. Leisle migarme shem klal. So God unto himself, if he's not shining his light down into this world and through these midos, these divine midos, so those have shemos, and we relate to them and understand them in different ways. Midas arachamim and etc. Like we saw, he's making war, he's making peace, he's judging a case. But leisle migarme shem klal. But the Atzmusa Yisbarach doesn't even have a shame at all. Uvetikunim herich be'inyan pirkei vari hashir koima kaviyachol. Okay, this is really high stuff. We've mentioned this term called the shiur koma. And the shiur koma, and it says kol yodea shir koima yesh lo chelek haba. This is how, and the Nefesh HaHaim talked about it in the first Sha'ar, how the universe in some way is a reflection of like humanoid form, like head, shoulders, knees, and toes. Like we know the Esser Spherois, like if you read Patach Eliyahu in the Siddur, there is a correspondence, Midas HaChesed to the right arm and Midas HaGvura to the left arm, etc. So putting that all together, that paradigm is called Shiur Koma. Again, of like a picturing in our heads of how everything is put together in this form. And so he's talking about Evarei Shiur Koma, Kaviyachol. Again, it's hard terminology, talking about Evarim, appendages. Amar Achweze Shekola Inyan Hu Lachza Bekol Ever Ve'ever De Gufe Shal Tenusa Lishtamuda Lebarnash Echis Noig Alma Bindala Mikrele Bekol Ever Kedikoyos Ve'echishtani Shmei Lefuma Hu Ever. So here the description is there's a correspondence between Evarim to Shemois. Okay, so that's a little bit of a hard idea, but that's what it's Ace Aver, the Iskari Bay Havaya Rachme, the Ace Aver, the Iskari Bay Elokim, the Ace Aver, the Iskari Bay other names. Okay, again he's just quoting an excerpt, and then Ekye Echze Al Ilas Ha'ilois, and the Shem Ekye is above it all. Let's see how he has it. Okay, the supernal man. He made the form of the Merkava supernal man, and in order to show the control of each limb of the body, of each element of the structure, to make known to man how the world works, so that he should know how to call him with each limb as appropriate, how his name changes with each limb. There's a limb which is called Yud Kei Vav Kei Mercy. There's a limb which is called Elokim. Ekya refers to the essence of the ultimate cause, which is one with all the names and does not change with any of them, as these changes are in the names and not in him. Okay, below Bay. The ilal al koli ilot iuchad bekol shman v'lo ishtani bekulu. The shinuyim bishman inun v'lav Bay. Right, Hashem is unchanging in his essence. V'ayin od. V'ayin reish shari gulim v'yosher shem b'sof zeh hashar reish madura tinyana v'tavin sham al pidvarenu. Okay, we've talked about this, that the Nefesh HaHaim was published posthumously by Reb Chaim Volozhin, and so his notes, which are essentially bibliographic, he has them right here in the text. It's a little bit awkward because if he's quoting these Sfarim, he should either tell us what they say in the text, or he should put them as a note at the bottom of the page. So it's as I say, a little bit awkward or like unfinished work. But it has to do with the history behind it, is that on his deathbed, he didn't dare publish the Sefer while he was alive, because it is a really bold Sefer to publish, right? It's Secrets of the Universe. He's talking about very holy ideas, which a lot of people are really not ready for these ideas, and not sophisticated enough intellectually to handle them without it freaking them out about talking about body parts and God and so forth, right? It's sort of freaky. So you have to, fill your belly first with Torah and mitzvahs and be a Talmid Chacham on a certain level of maturity in order to appreciate this stuff and to not let it knock you off your feet, and to, this stuff is nuanced and very, very delicate and has to be dealt with b'koved rosh. So because of that, the Nefesh HaChaim, Reb Chaim Volozhin himself, he did not publish it in his lifetime. I think he hesitated. He was scared. But he knew it was important, and it has to do, we've talked about this, with his sort of war against Chassidut, and the fact that the Tanya was published by the Alter Rebbe of Chabad, which also has a lot of very, very high stuff in it. So he thought, they put out theirs, so I'm going to put out mine. But he didn't really do it. Maybe he felt he had more editing to do or whatever. But on his deathbed, he commanded his son Yitzhak Volozhin, who became the Rosh Yeshiva of Volozhin, and he said, Itzaleh, you have to publish this work. It's the first thing you have to do after I die, and don't change a word. Okay? So the father told him very clearly, this is it, and don't touch it. Don't edit or change it. So that's why I say, in my humble opinion, who am I? But in my humble opinion, as I read the text, it's like he sends us to all these holy Sfarim. Does he expect us to open them? Or, why does he include all this stuff if he doesn't tell us exactly what it says? So he's partly buttressing his case. He's saying, I'm not making any of this stuff up. I'm bringing it from the Mekoros of Chazal, from the Zohar and other places. But in my opinion, again, it should have been put into footnotes if he's not actually telling us, quotations of the Sfarim. But it is what it is. Here's another paragraph. V'zeh kol hasagatenu kaviyachol, oto yitbarach, hakol mitzad inyan hischabruso el haolamot v'hispashtuso yizbarach b'toicham. That's a great sentence. That all of our human understanding of God is only about in as much as he connects himself. He's chabrus, connection, and he's spashtus, extension of himself into the worlds that we know. Because we do know worlds, right? We're here, and we can look up at the sky. We can talk about angels. We can talk about higher realms, even places maybe we haven't been, but we could fathom them, and we know God is there. So there are a number of realms that we can know that Hashem created them. He's connected to them. He's extended himself into them. But that's all still about his chabruso v'his pashtuso. It's not about atzmuso. It's not about Hashem unto himself. And again, that's a really cardinal and very important idea, recognizing the limitation on human understanding. We can't know God, okay? כמו שכתוב פרשת בו הנ"ל דאפילו התמונה לסלי באסרי אלא כדנוכיס להמלוכה עליו ויספשט על בריין יסחזי לכל חד כפומרה וחוזם ודמיון דלהון והאיהו ביד הנביאים את דמה. So even the Nevi'im, right, the people who had the most insight, right, and let it be Moshe Rabbeinu, Tmunas Hashem Yabit, it says about him, but it's talking about that. And when it says the word Tmunah, it's talking about when God Nachis comes down, Le'amlacha, to rule over, to be king, right? Malchus is the lowest of all the spheres. So when he comes down to Malchus and to rule over angels and oilamos and people, and he's mispashet on the brios, so then he can appear to each of the prophets according to Amara Nevuah, according to Chazon Yeshayahu, according to a Dimayon, V'ha'ihu biyad ha'nevi'im edameh. So that's how Hashem reveals himself to his prophets. Okay. He has a provocative Haggadah here. Let's see it. Ubezeh yuvan ma'amaram zal. In a midrash that says Yoinasi Tamasi. Okay? Yonasi is, right, my bird, my beloved, my dove. And Tamasi could be my complete one, but Chazal darshan it to Umasi. The Zelashan, Rabbi Yanai Oimer to Umati. Okay? Which is a shocking thing to say, that God refers to the Jewish people as Yoinasi, which is my beloved partner, like a dove. Doves are monogamous. They have a partner, one partner. So God has a partner, the Jewish people, but he refers to us as Tu'umati, his twin. And we actually had it in last week's Parsha, when it talked about hanging a Jew, Kola Niskalim Nitlin. When you do skila to a man, after you do skila, you hang him up. You don't kill him by hanging, you hang up the corpse after you've killed him by stoning. And the Torah says you have to take him down right away. Don't leave him hanging. Because kilelat Elokim talui. And Rashi brings, again, incredibly provocative mashal. Mashal l'shnei achim. One is the king, and his brother, Yatzala Listus, the twin brother of the king, is a pirate, a bandit, an armed robber. And he gets caught by the authorities, and they hang him up on the gates of the city. And everybody looks at the gates of the city, and there's a person hanging there, and it looks exactly like the king. And it's a twin brother of the king. And it's a busha. Think of, all the bad news cycles that there'll be, because it looks like the king is hanged. And the king is actually sitting on his throne. These are the words of Rashi. But think about what Rashi's saying. He's saying when a human being is hanging up, It's as if the king were hanging because a human being is in the divine image. So there's something that's a terrible anathema. It's a busha. It's a klala, kilalat Elokim. It's a klala to God that a human being is hanging up because a human being is kaviyachol, an identical twin to God, which is like a radical thing to say. But that's the language that we're using right now, this lashon tu'umati. Just on point of information, Rav Daniel has twin daughters, but they are not identical. I know Shira, they're not identical, but they are twins. Here we're talking about Kuchabrichu and Klal Yisrael. Rabbi Yani Amar Tu'umasi kaviyachol lo ani gadol mimena velo hi gedola mimeni. So what does that mean? V'lichayra nifletahu. What does it mean? How could, Chazal use that type of language of twins, and neither one is greater than the other, not I'm greater than she, nor is she greater than I. Uledvareinu hu mevu'ar. So according to what we said, somehow this can be explained. Achar shekola hasagot b'miktzat shemedabrim bo yitbarach hu rak mitzad hischabruso yizbarach el ha'olamois. V'kol kilos kavanaso yizbarach b'brias ha'olamois v'yischabruso alehem. Everything that we can fathom about God is only because of his decision to connect up with the world and with us. And that was his kavana in creation of the world, to connect with it. Hayarak bishvil Yisrael. So again, this is really ethnocentric, that it's because of the Jewish people that the world was created. Kimamaram zal bereshis bishvil Yisrael shenikra reshis. V'zema shekasav te'umasi. So in that respect, there's a twin here. Lo ani gadol mimena v'lo hi gdola mimeni. Ratzaloymar b'shanim. Wow. V'haven. So the Nefesh HaHaim, or the Rabbi Yitzhak, is explaining, since when can God be compared to the Jewish people? From the time that he decided to create the world, but from Bereshis, Bishvil Yisrael Shenikra Reshis. So we talked today that there wasn't time before that. That was the creation of time, but there was Hashem unto himself before that, and Hashem unto himself before that. We can't talk about. We can't think about. There's no Shemois even. There's not even any names for God. So inasmuch as Hashem has revealed himself through his connection and his extension, and his pashtus and his chabrus into the world, from the time that he did that for the Jewish people. So the concept of the Jewish people of Yisrael goes back to the very beginning of Bereshis. So lo ani gdola mimena v'lo hi gdola mimeni. So he's not older than us, and we're not older than him. That's how he says b'shanim. That's a reference to time. It's maybe a little bit forced, but it's a fascinating idea. Let me go on a little bit. V'lechein tavu anshe knesset gdoila hanusach shel kol birchos hamitzvos b'lashon nochach v'nistar. Okay, again, very important idea that we've been talking about. Hashem is satim mitzad atzmo v'galui mitzad ma'asav. And so in every bracha, we start Baruch Atah, Tchilasam Baruch Atah, Hulashon Nochach. In English, we call it the second person. In Hebrew, that's called Lashon Nochach, about the person who's across the table from you. So all brachas start Baruch Atah. Like, it makes me think of Martin Buber, I and thou. So the blessings start thou. Blessed art thou, O Lord our God. So Tchilasam Baruch Atah Hu Lashon Noichach U'Misayamim Asher Kiddushanu V'Tzivanu Lashon Nistar, which is the third person. He did. We don't say Asher Kiddashtanu. We sometimes say that in Kiddush. We have those words Asher Kiddashtanu, but basically the nusach of brachas begins Lashon Nochach, second person, And the completion of the brachas is in third person. Asher kiddushanu v'tzivanu lashon nistar. Because otherwise, like we say, Asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, mitzvotav, his mitzvahs. Why don't we say b'mitzvotecha? That would be consistent language from Baruch Atah Hashem, Asher Kiddashta B'mitzvotecha. So they're clearly, I mean, this is undeniable, that there's a shift in what's called person between the beginning and the end of the sentence in every bracha that we make. Boyer Priya Eitz instead of Barata Priya Eitz. Oh, right? So there's a shift from second to third person in every bracha, and he's describing that to the Anshe Knesset Gdoila. Right, brachas are midrabanan. There's something that were formulated in the beginning of Bayit Sheni, and there's a deep theological truth here. And here it is: Shemitzad hischabru so yizbarach v'ritzoyno elo olamois sha'al yedei ze yesh lanu k'tzat hasaga kol dehu. It is through God's connection, through His will to the world that exists. That's how we can know something about God. Anu medabrim lenochach. So then we have permission to talk directly to God. Baruch atah Hashem. Ki ha'olamois hem tzrichim le'inyan tosefet v'ribuy. Remember, this is all about the meaning of Baruch atah Hashem. What does it mean to bless God? And we proved, the Nefesh HaHaim proved, it doesn't mean shevach v'tihila, you are praised and great. It means you were augmented and we're adding. And what does that mean? So he's now finally getting to the point that we're saying, we need more influx and connection of God's atzmuso yizbarach, the unknown, unfathomable essence of God. We need more of that to connect up with us in our world. Hamischaber eleim. And that's called Melech HaOlam, K'mo shekosev hanal, K'denach lam lachalayo, v'spashit al biryan, v'hamitzaveh otanu, umikadshenu, hu atzmuso yizbarach. What is giving Klal Yisrael Kedusha that we say, Asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav? That's coming from Ein Sof Baruch Hu. That's coming from a place above the Shemos. The Shemos, we can say, Baruch Atah Hashem. But the Kedusha is coming from a higher hidden place called Ein Sof Baruch Hu. Levado Hasatum Mikol Stimin. That's totally concealed and unrevealed to anybody or anything. Lachein tiknu belashon nistar asher kiddushanu v'tzivanu. It's beautiful. We learned tonight about the language of every bracha that we make. It begins in second person and it concludes in third person. It begins in second person because I'm here and God's here. So I can talk to God man to man. Baruch atah Hashem. I'm blessing God face to face. But there are, of course, innumerable unknowable aspects of God, much higher than anything fathomable. So we have to refer to that in third person. So the bracha continues that the Kedusha and the stuff he's endowing us with comes from a hidden place that's totally unknowable. And what we're doing when we say Baruch Atah, that we are bringing Tosefes Veriboy, an increase in the influx of divine energy that's coming into this world between the hidden aspects of Ein Sof Baruch Hu and Hashem, who is known unto us in his existence. And again, Hashem has this indivisible unity, which is, you can't really divide it up. It's all one thing. But these are different aspects of the different shemos that we use. Okay, gentlemen, thank you for being here with me. Shkoyach.
Tough stuff.
Okay, you get extra credit for that.
Boy,